Hey everybody, have you been looking forward to playing Warrior in Phase 4 of SOD? Well, if you are, stop looking forward to it because it'll actually be quite disappointing. Now, there's a lot of things going on here for Warrior, but one of the major things that they're doing in Phase 4 is that they're changing a ton of the ruins and the functionality of the big 30-minute cooldowns that Warrior had, which are Recklessness, Retaliation, and Shield Wall. So we're going to tackle those first. You can see it right here where I've highlighted. Recklessness now only gives you 50% crit chance, has a reduced duration, but has a cooldown of 5 minutes, meaning that during a raid, you're going to be able to have Rec up every single fight, which honestly is quite good because your damage is going to be more consistent across the board. And on top of that, Retaliation and Shield Wall have also been reduced to a 5-minute cooldown. And another really cool ability is Meat Hook, which is an ability that costs rage, but it basically functions like a death grip from a Death Knight. So overall, pretty cool. And on top of that, tanking classes, which includes Warrior, are going to have more damage based off of how much defense skill they have over the normal cap, which is 300. So if you have like 305, 310 defense, your abilities are somehow going to scale with the extra defense to improve your damage. All good changes. And now that we got those changes out of the way, let's tackle the new ruins. If you don't know already, we're going to have finger ruins, which basically give you weapon skill. So you'll get +5 weapon skill to whichever ruin in the ring slot you put in there. And let me pan over to the game just so you can see that. If you go to the ring slot, you have all these weapons and you can get +5 on any different weapon, which is going to be really good for rating. If you don't know, weapon skill is extremely important for rating. So overall, really good changes. And for the cloak ruin, I'm going to do this in the game because I think it's a little bit more clear. We're going to have Shockwave, which is a frontal cone AoE stun, which anybody who's played the modern version of the game will know what Shockwave is. This will be more of a PvP or tanking ability. You have Sudden Death, which is another retail-esque ability where basically your attacks can proc execute, which will allow you to execute during non-execute windows. So whenever the boss is above 25% HP, there's a chance you can use an execute, and execute can hit for like 3k. So if you crit with it, so it is extremely strong. And that is without world buffs, without all the best gear in the game and all that stuff. So yeah, really good ability. I like it a lot. And execute will now retain 10 rage after using execute, which will work in the execute phase. So every time you execute, you're going to be maintaining 10 rage. Obviously, it's going to be really, really good. And lastly, we have Fresh Meat, which if you read it, you can see it gives you Bloodthirst. Bloodthirst has a 100% chance to enrage you for the first time on the target, and then 10% chance each subsequent time on the target that you use it, and also increases the physical damage you deal by 10%. So another really good ability. Personally, I like Sudden Death because I like using Execute, but I don't have the Sims yet. Maybe Fresh Meat will be better for Fury, maybe not, I'm not sure. But anyways, those are going to be the abilities we have. And on top of that, we have a bunch of changes here. If you go back to Wowhead, where there's a lot of nerfs. Now, I know people are going to be up in arms, but I think the main reason that they nerfed all these runes for Warrior are that Recklessness is now a 5-minute cooldown. So having a 5-minute cooldown that gives you 50% crit is a lot of damage. Whenever you're trying to do like a speed run or you're just destroying the bosses in general, Warriors are probably going to be near the top no matter what, just because they're going to have so much extra damage from the crit. So I'm going to hold off on my judgment. It is PTR, and on top of that, Warrior Scale, probably the best out of any class with world buffs because of the way that Rage functions. So in general, I think Warrior might be a really good class. It really depends on how long fights are and, you know, how good they scale. But let me actually go over the changes outside of just talking in like theoretical. So Single-Minded Fury now does not give you a damage bonus. So that is a nerf to Fury, meaning you're probably never going to run Single-Minded Fury. Instead, let me head back over to the game. You're probably going to be running, let me find it right here. You're probably going to be running Endless Rage over Single-Minded Fury because Endless Rage just gives you more rage, which will combo really well with Consumed by Rage, which got changed as well. Let me go back to Wildhead so you can see it. Consumed by Rage now activates when exceeding 60 rage instead of 80, and now allows you to enrage. So it's weird though because it doesn't give you extra damage. It'll only enrage you. However, and being enraged allows you to deal more damage already. So it doesn't give you a damage bonus, but it does enrage you. And enraging in general gives you a damage bonus. So there's that. I'm not really sure how I feel about these changes, a lot of them. But we're going to keep going through. Blood Frenzy has been redesigned to now increase your Rend damage. Probably not going to be that significant because Rend never really did a lot of damage in general anyway, but that's a weird but okay change, I think. Flagellation has been redesigned to now be for tank warriors, where now you gain rage from physical damage taken as if you aren't wearing any armor. And if you play a warrior and you take off all your armor and you get hit really hard, well, guess what? Yeah, you're going to get a lot of rage. So it's a kind of like a tank warrior buff, which is kind of interesting. Maybe it'll be good for tank warriors. Rampage is probably one of the only ruins that actually got buffed, which now allows you to basically have a 2-minute cooldown, which gives you 10% additional attack power for 30 seconds. Interesting. Wrecking Crew now causes an enrage effect and increases damage done by Mortal Strike, Bloodthirst, and Shield Slam. Kind of whatever. Threat reduction in Gladiator stance has been increased, meaning you're going to have a lot harder time tanking in Glad stance. I went over Consumed by Rage. The Booming Voice talent doesn't really matter all too much. Commanding Shout, rage cost has been removed. It's going to be very similar to Battle Shout. And then I went over the 30-minute cooldown changes. And before we cap out this video, I will go over the tier set bonuses that warriors get. Let's go over the two-piece tier bonus, which gives you 10 rage whenever you change stances. And because of the way that you have to use overpower as a DPS warrior, this will actually be quite useful because you're going to be having to go to battle stance to overpower and then go back to Zerker stance. So in general, that is a pretty decent tier bonus. The 4-piece will be for 5 seconds after leaving a stance. You can use abilities that require that stance as if you were still in that stance. So basically, if you go to battle stance or you're in battle stance and you go to berserker stance, you can use overpower in Zerker stance without having to go back to battle stance. I'm not really sure how this will function all too much, but hey, maybe it will be good. Maybe even for PvP, it'll be good because you won't have to take Warbringer. Maybe you can just have this 4-piece bonus and be able to charge in Berserker stance with the 4-piece bonus. And then the final bonus you have is for 10 seconds after activating a stance, you gain an additional benefit. And you can see here, Battle Stance and Gladiator Stance increase your damage by 10%. Berserker Stance increases your critical strike chance by 10%, and Defensive Stance gives you 10% reduced physical damage reduction. So pretty interesting. I'm not really sure how this will function in practice, but I mean, all in all, these are pretty interesting tier bonuses, I think, compared to some other ones. So yeah, I think these are okay. And then for tank warriors, I'm going to gloss over them. You get block value for the two-piece. You gain 1 extra rage every time you take damage for the 4-piece. And for the final tier piece, you're going to get threat generation in defensive stance and more damage in glad stance. So in general, I think warrior kind of got shit on in the PTR, but you have to remember that you are getting wreck, shield wall, and retaliation on a 5-minute cooldown. So while I do think that the overall consistent damage of warrior is going to be bad, they might actually be pretty decent when you actually take into account that boss fights can last very, very short amounts of time when you're in a really good group. So warrior in a speed run might actually still be extremely strong. However, they're not going to be consistent compared to other classes like rogue, at least in my opinion. And right here I have my arms warrior. Now, in my opinion, I think arms warrior is more fun, primarily because you're not using consumed by rage. I hate that talent because it kind of makes you feel like you're pulling rage a lot. However, because you're also going to be taking endless rage as a fury warrior with that talent, it might actually not be as bad, especially when you take into account things like wind fury and all the world buffs you're going to be having. But let me just showcase a little bit of what warrior is going to feel like, especially with sudden death. Sudden death is really funny because it gives you wings. You kind of saw it there for a split second. Let me see if I can proc it again. But yeah, warrior in general is pretty interesting to me. I think overall it's a fun class to play. And yeah, you see this little purple wing effect, kind of makes me look like a freaking evil paladin. That is Sun and Death. I kind of like that it gives you wings, and you can see it crit for 4K, and I'm not even in really good gear. So yeah, I think Warrior will be fun to play, especially when you take into account world buff. So yeah, I wouldn't freak out too much if you're a Warrior player. I think they're going to be okay, especially because you could pop a wreck on a 5-minute cooldown. So overall, I think Arms is pretty fun. I actually think Arms is more fun than Fury at the moment, just because of Consumed by Rage. And as you can see here, it's pretty fluid. I'm not playing it perfectly on, obviously, but that's because I don't have any add-ons and I haven't played my Warrior in a minute. But still, I think Warrior is going to be a lot of fun. Obviously, you're going to have a lot of consistent damage and consistent AoE, because Warrior in general has always been very, consistent, especially with gear. But anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope this recap kind of showed you everything you needed to know about SOD Phase 4 for Warrior. Now, are these changes for Warrior freaking peak? No, they're honestly not very good, but they did change a lot with the class, and we're on PTR, so don't freak out too much. I know we're talking about SOD here, and we know the developers, they have like 2 people on like a skeleton crew balancing everything, but let's try to hold out on the judgment. Let's pray that they actually change the class up a little bit, tweak it a little bit. That way it's not dog water in overall types of like overall damage, but that's for the future. But anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching. Please like, subscribe, and comment if you enjoyed the video. And also, if you want to head over to my Discord, if you play shooter games and you want to get coached for shooter games, shameless plug here, I actually am pretty freaking good at aiming. I can coach you in a lot of different FPS games. I thought I would throw that out there, but we're talking about WoW players, so none of you probably have touched a mouse and keyboard or controller in like 20 years. So anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you so much for watching. I'm out.